Hello and welcome to Faithfully Stampin' with Jennifer Helm. I am Jennifer Helm, the Faithful Stamper, an independent demonstrator with Stampin' Up. Today I am going to show you how to make a W fun fold card. This is a card that is not as complicated as it looks to assemble, but it packs a big punch because when you open it, it has this lovely fold out. And the reason it's called a W card is if you hold it this way, you can see the W that it makes when you assemble it. So this is a card with lots of options for arrangement and placement, and I thought I would go ahead and show you how to make this today. To start with, you need a piece of cardstock that is 4 1/4 by 11. Sometimes when you are creating a card base, it doesn't matter whether you use this cut or the other half sheet of paper, but for this particular card with the W fold out, you definitely want a piece that is 4 1/4 by 11, and you're going to score it down the middle on the 11-inch side at 5 1/2. And once you've done that, you can go ahead and fold it and then set that aside for just a minute. Next, you are going to need a strip of cardstock. I tend to match my card base with the strip of cardstock, and I'm using Bermuda Bay here. This strip of cardstock is 1 3/4 inches tall by 11 inches wide. This is going to form our W. And you will need a scoring tool of some kind, whether it be our paper trimmer with a scoring blade or the actual scoreboard. I do need to open up my extendable arm here for just a minute. So on the 11-inch side, you're going to just score, no cutting. You're going to score it at 2 3/4, 5 1/2, and 8 1/4. And that is all the scoring you need to do. So you can go ahead and put your scoring or tool away. Now, before we start assembling the W, I'm going to do a little bit of stamping. For the inside, where I'm going to start, you will need 2 pieces of Whisper White, which is now Basic White. It was Whisper White for so many years. Stampin' Up! Consultants are going to call it that until we die. These are 5 1/4 by 4. You could experiment with different colors if you wanted, say, pale colors. I went with white for most of mine because I'm going to stamp and then write my signature for my recipient. So you obviously don't want too dark of a color or it wouldn't show. Now you can decide as you're putting a card together how you want to assemble it. You can stamp your sentiment here at the top, which is what I'm going to do, of either panel, or you could use it at the bottom. Something to keep in mind though is you definitely want a narrow sentiment, something that's not too tall. If you were to stamp a sentiment with big letters, it would be covered up by the majority of your panels. So just keep that in mind. Go with something a little bit narrow, maybe 1 line. It really depends on the stamp, and I would recommend not going much over 1 inch. To start with here, I'm going to take Happy Birthday and stamp in real red, and I'm going to stamp up here at the top. And I will show you, I forgot to show you which stamp set we're using. This is Party Puffins from our brand new annual catalog, which just debuted earlier this week. So this is fun. It's some really cute artwork with these puffins, and then some fun happy birthday sentiments, Make-A-Wish. And this is great because it has from all of us. So if you've got a group at work or something like that, you could definitely send a card from all of you. So this is all the stamping I'm going to do for now. So I'm going to break out my adhesive. I'm going to start with my Stampin' Seal Plus. This was not behaving earlier, so we'll see if it wants to behave this evening. Stampin' Seal Plus is my favorite because it is nice and sturdy. It's great for 3D projects as well as cards or scrapbooking. And it has little segmented tape strips, so It's my favorite. We also have Stamp and Seal, which is wonderful as well. This I just tend to use more often. And a little goes a long way. So I'm just going to put these in place. And then I'm going to do some stamping on the front panels of the card. So I'm going to fold that closed. I have to start with a piece of Flirty Flamingo. This is 5 1/4 by 4. I consider this my standard insert size for either one layer on your card front or on the inside. I'm going to go ahead and glue this to the front. And so then I'm going to do some stamping on this next layer. So this is 3 3/4 inches tall by 5 inches wide. So I'm going to break out some of those adorable puffins from the Party Puffin set. I'm going to stamp in Memento ink. This is Tuxedo Black ink. We do sell these ink pads and a refill. And I'm going to use this ink. It's my go-to black ink for any projects that I need. And also if I am planning to use our Stampin' Blends, which are our alcohol markers, this is the perfect ink to do that because it won't smear once you bring in those alcohol markers. So to start with, I'm going to take this stamp. This is our adorable little puffin with the party hat. And I'm going to make sure I have good ink coverage. Typically tap, 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 and you've got good ink coverage, but for something like this that has a large surface, I always take a look and I can see that I don't have enough ink. So I'm just going to tap a little bit more until I see that I have enough ink that makes me happy. Now I could use a Stamparatus tool to be able to restamp if it wasn't perfect the first time, but I didn't break that out for tonight. And these stamps have a built-in cushion. Since they're red rubber, are foam stamps, so you don't need any extra matting underneath of these. So there is our adorable little puffin. Sometimes I call them penguins by mistake. They're puffins. Now I am going to set that ink to the side for a moment, and I'm going to put my sentiment on the card. I'm going to use Make-A-Wish from the same stamp set. And what I decided to do, rather than stamp it once and have a lot of open space here, I'm going to stamp it a few times. So I'm going to use Bermuda Bay, and I'm going to stamp and then leave a little space. Remember not to sink your stamps into your ink pad too much. If you do that, sometimes you get extra ink around the edges of the stamp or in places you don't want it, and you don't want that coming off on your card. I actually got lucky that I didn't have any of that rub off on my cardstock. Sometimes I am not so lucky. That happened to me earlier when I was assembling a sample. So now that I've got that stamped in Bermuda Bay and I've cleaned my stamp off using my Stampin' Chamois, I'm going to come back and stamp in Pumpkin Pie. I almost called it Paper Pumpkin. That's our subscription kit, not an ink pad. And so I'm just going to fill in these little spots. And I just thought this was a cute little design for the card. Now before I glue this down, I'm going to do just a little bit of coloring. I mentioned our Stampin' Blends, and I find these are lots of fun to color with. So I am going to color the beak. I promise this isn't going to take all day. One little tidbit I'd like to share, sometimes these alcohol markers get a little juicy. I try my darndest to remember not to open the caps on my markers over the project I'm working on, because every now and then I will get a juicy marker, and the worst thing is if I have this card front all done and then I get an alcohol sploosh and it ruins the card, or I've ruined a shirt that way once because I had a marker that was very juicy, and I don't want that to happen to you. So there's some dark pumpkin pie. I'm going to break out Lovely Lipstick. This is actually a retired color, and I apologize for using that. I realized today I do not have the Flirty Flamingo blend, so I definitely will be picking up that set. And I wanted a nice bright pink to coordinate with that Flirty Flamingo, and this is pretty close. And then I have Light Bermuda Bay. I'm just going to fill in his little hat. I'm not really doing any blending here. I'm just simply filling in with color like I would with a regular marker. So now that that is finished, I'm going to bring my card front back over and then just use my adhesive again to glue this panel on the front. And we will come back when the card is all finished and I'll add just a little bit of embellishment. Now, I'll teach you how to do the W insert. So we've got this piece, we've already scored it. So what I do first is take my strip and fold it so this middle score line comes up to the ceiling. So fold it down. You fold it in half, and then you're basically going to fold towards that middle crease with the other ends. And that way, when it's all folded, you have your W piece. Now you need some tear and tape or double-sided tape, something very strong to keep this on the card. Regular adhesive is wonderful for most things, but for 3D projects like this, you want something stronger. So I recommend tear and tape. And if you have a clear block handy with a straight edge, this is a perfect tool to use. So hold your W so it looks like a W, and then fold it shut, and you're going to put one piece of tear and tape on the very end of your open edges. And what I do is I line the clear block up on the edge and pull, when it works, pull that tape towards me, and I have a nice clean edge on my project. We'll see if I can do a better job this time. And just flip the whole thing over, and again get that open edge, and pull and set that tape aside, but don't set it too far away. You're going to need that again in a minute. And I like to give this a good press with my fingers. You can use a bone folder if you have one handy, but I like to just give it some extra pressure because it makes it easier to peel the backing off. And I'm going to share a tip with you that I learned recently. Sometimes I take forever trying to peel the backing off my tape. If my fingernails are short or I've injured my finger or something, trying to pick this off with my fingernails is difficult. So if you have a piercing tool, whether it be a straight piercing tool or something like our Take Your Pick tool, which has a couple different options on it, you can take it and slide that sharp tip right under the edge and lift up the backing until you can grab it with your fingers and it comes right off, and it's so easy. I wish I'd been doing this for years. What I find easiest for putting this W form on the paper is to actually, don't peel off the second strip of tape yet, just pick off the one, and I open it up just a little bit. So I keep this folded and then have this one straight edge to work with. And you're going to want to put it roughly in the center. It doesn't have to be perfectly centered on the paper, but pretty close. And we'll talk about that a little bit at the end as to why you want to be careful with your placement. And then you're going to line up this edge on your W strip with the edge of your card, not the edge of the insert. Actually do the whole edge of the card. So I just eyeball it, line it up straight, and give it a good press down. And then an easy trick to get this to work perfectly every time is fold your W shut. Go ahead and peel the backing off your tape, whether it be with your fingers or a tool. I like to hold it down with my left hand, and I'm gonna keep holding it while I close the card, and then I'm gonna slide my fingers out and just press it down. Give it a good press, and then it's perfectly placed on the other side. Just a handy little trick that I learned. So now we're going to assemble some panels before we glue them into the card. You will need 4 pieces of cardstock, and these could be the same color of your card base if you want, or you can change it up. I went with pumpkin pie to coordinate, and I pulled in a lot of the colors from this designer series paper that I'm using. This is from a host exclusive set if you are interested in hosting a Stampin' Up! Demonstration, and it's in 2021. which is where we are now in case you're watching this video later, you can actually host a party and then choose this paper as your reward. It is a 48-piece packet of designer series paper, 4 sheets each. I'm not doing that math right now, but it's wonderful, wonderful paper. There are so many designs, black and white on one side and then a color design on the other. So many projects, and that huge pack of paper is just going to be delightful to work with. So that's where that designer series paper comes from, in case you're wondering. So these cardstock panels are 2 1/4 inches wide by 2 3/4 inches tall, and you need 4 of them. And then for a layer, you can either use all designer series paper or all Whisper White, whatever you decide to do, whatever combination. These pieces are 2 1/2 inches tall by 2 inches wide. For this card, I'm going with 2 and 2. And I'm going to quickly stamp these two, so I'm going to bring my Memento ink back over for a moment. And I have 2 images I'm going to use. One of them is, I call this little guy the Shy Penguin. He looks a little timid compared to his buddies in the stamp set. And then a birthday cake. And the fun thing about this birthday cake is you could use it for your accent stamp on your envelope, or you could use it on a card that you don't want to use your puffins on, because you could use that by itself. So I'm going to let these sit for just 1 minute because I'm going to break out those Stampin' Blends again briefly. I'm going to put the cover back on my Memento ink because I'm always liable to stick my fingers or something else in it. So I'm going to grab my adhesive again and layer these two together. So 2 panels of designer series paper. And then we'll do a little coloring and then glue those panels on as well. So for the little puffin guy, I'm just going to do his beak and his feet. Obviously, he doesn't require a lot of coloring. I'm a sucker for stamp sets with cute little images like that. The puffins are just fun. So he's done. So I'm just going to add a little bit of color to our birthday cake. I decided the plate's going to be orange, so I can pull that color in. I am going to use, let's see, this lovely lipstick again for the icing on the cake. Our little frosting layer. And then I'm just going to finish up these candles. And again, this is just really coloring like I'm using a marker, not blending anything. For the candle flames, I'm going to break out some, let's see, this is Dark Mango Melody. And I'm using the fine tip ends on all this since most of these are small images. And then last but not least, I'm going to break out Light Bermuda Bay and just pop a tiny bit of color. Dotting is really easier than trying to stay in the lines here on my candles. And then a little adhesive on the backs of these. Almost glued. Not that it would matter if I glued it upside down since I can turn the panel around, but it does help if you glue things the right direction, right? So here we go. All my panels are done. So bring your card back over, and what we need to do is bring your tear and tape back over again, and you need a piece of tear and tape on each of the panels, one at the top and one at the bottom. Just don't let them be too wide. You don't want them too narrow, but you don't want them any wider than your panel because it would show behind your panel, and then your card would not operate correctly because something would be sticking together. So I don't cut these, I just tear them off as I go and make sure they're not too wide. And I roughly try to keep them centered. You don't have a lot of room on the sides once you get your panels on. But don't make your pieces too long, as I mentioned. And I like to give these a good press as well. Helps the tape stick and then helps you get that backing off. So, again, you can use a bone folder if you have them. So I'm going to break out my Take Your Pick tool one more time. And this way you can get the backing off and you don't have to see me struggle, maybe, for 10 minutes trying to get my fingernails to work. So this is just a very handy way to remove the backing from your projects. You can also use the same tool to pop the backing off your dimensionals. Some people are able to stab that and pull their backing off. I haven't quite perfected that technique yet, but I'll have to work on that. Another little tip for you. Now, for assembling your card, I mentioned placement. You have several different options, and I'll show you that in some samples here in a moment. But remember, you have your sentiment stamp. So obviously, if I were to line my panels up here at the top, I'd be covering my sentiment up. So I don't want to do that. So for this card in particular, I'm going to drop this panel down a little lower. You could, if you have enough room, I mentioned at the beginning, you could line them up level. And I could do that if that sentiment wasn't here. But it's up to you how you want to place things. So I'm going to keep this panel a little bit low so I can see my sentiment. Then I'm going to bring my cake over. For the second panel, I'm going to put it up a little higher. Just offset them. I just thought this would be a fun design. So then again, for my third panel, which is that DSP, I'm going to bring it back down. I'm just going to eyeball it. If you are very specific with your measurements, get a ruler. I tend to eyeball things. That's why things are crooked sometimes, and that's okay. And then I'm going to bring this last panel back up, and that way I have room to sign my name before I pop this in the mail. Now, this card is a little bit thicker because of the W inside. This little crumb decided to jump in there. It doesn't want to go away. When you fold it shut, there is added thickness, so I recommend extra postage on this card. But it is so cute, and there's so many options for different designs you can do with this simple fold. It looks complicated, but it really isn't. One last finishing touch. I'm going to add a little bling, because who doesn't love bling on a card? And I'm going to use some silver epoxy dots. And let's see. I always fuss with placement. I like to do things in groups of 3s or 5s. I tend not to go with even numbers. And obviously you could leave the embellishment off if you don't want that on your card. And let's see. See, I told you I fuss with placement. And there you go. And I mentioned earlier that you wanted to be careful with the sentiment and extra ink around the sides. Sometimes if you do what I did on my first card, I had 2 little ink blotches that I didn't want, and rather than redo the whole card front, I was able to take some embellishments like this and perfectly cover them up. So just a little tip for you. So here is our sweet little W fun fold card with our party puffins. And I did coordinate the envelope by using another puffin from the set. This little guy cracks me up. It looks like he's doing a karate kick. But I have some more samples to show you before we go. I hope you've enjoyed learning this technique. This features another of our new stamp sets. This is from the hand-penned suite with these hand-drawn flowers. For this one, I kept my sentiment up here in the corner. I could have stamped it anywhere. And then I just put the flowers around it. These were photopolymer stamps, so I stamped the outlines in Night of Navy and then came back with Balmy Blue, Mint Macaron, and Calypso Coral, like my sentiment, and just filled in the flowers. And then I added a little bling. And then this one, when you open it up, so pretty inside. I went with stamped images for all 4 panels, and again, same with the 2-step stamping. And you can see here I lined them up perfectly along the bottom of that W strip. I laid everything out before I did any stamping or gluing to see if this would fit. I wouldn't recommend going with something much bigger than this stamp, but this one did happen to fit perfectly here and fit with my happy birthday theme, and I still have room to sign my name. So just keep in mind not to use a tall stamp when you're stamping on the inside. And I'll show you another idea here in a minute. So there's the floral card. This is another piece of paper from that Hostess exclusive designer series paper pack. This one I was trying to come up with what could I pair with it, and to me it just said chicken. So I went with our Hey Birthday Chick and Hey Chick sets, which we offer currently at the moment. Added a little embellishment. So here, instead of stamping on the card front itself, I just added some stamped images and went with a panel of designer series paper, same measurements. And then when you open the inside, I stamped with Memento and colored these images. And here's another idea for your sentiment. If you don't want to try something, or you don't have a stamp that's narrow enough to fit here on the card, if it'll fit here on your panel, go ahead and put it there. So this way I have more room to write at the bottom if I like. And last but not least, oh, and I did accent my envelope with that little dancing chicken. Isn't it cute? Last but not least, I always try to make a card for the holidays to show that this is great for any occasion. Here, instead of layers of cardstock, I just simply used a panel of designer series paper that was 5.5 by 5.25 by 4 on the front of the card, and added this DSP strip and my sentiment and a little bling. And then this one, I went crazy on the inside, because instead of doing cardstock and stamped images, I used a cardstock layer to start, but then I added a layer of designer series paper, and then the opposing color designer series paper, and this is our Christmas tree punch that we have in our catalog. And I kept my sentiment simple here at the top, and I still have room to write at the bottom. So you have lots of options for doing these cards in any design and arrangement that you like. So I hope you enjoyed learning this W Fun Fold card today. I would be delighted if you would click that subscribe button and come back here to check out more of my Stampin' videos at Faithfully Stampin' with Jennifer Helm. You can also hop on over to Facebook and find me at The Faithful Stamper and follow me there. I do live videos twice a week and would be happy to have you join me. Thank you so much for watching. Happy crafting!